Well, hello, everyone. Welcome to This Week in Politics. This week, I want to do something a little different. Um, we really had no major news stories this week. One of the big news story was that Donald Trump made his first United Nations speech. And I was going to talk about that. I wanted to tear that speech apart and look at it, but that has been done to death. Needless to say, the press has tore it apart and made it sound really bad. But I listened to the speech, and from where I stand, it was awesome. The memorable thing from that speech was this: Donald Trump told the whole world that North Korea is committing suicide by continuing their nuclear ambition. And what he said is if they continue down this path and threaten the United States will have no choice but to completely destroy North Korea. The significance of that is this: nobody can say they didn't know. Nobody can say it was a surprise. Everybody has been notified. China, Russia, the whole world knows where we stand. If he continues to threaten the United States, we will go in and destroy him. I say good. That should have been done 20 years ago. That was the major news event this week. And like I said, I was going to go in. Here's what I wanted to do. I wanted to go in and go line by line through his speech and expand on it. And I still think that's a good idea. But the longer the week went, the more I thought, you know what, that has just been done to death. What I want to talk about is this stupid investigation by the special prosecutor, Mueller, who is supposed to be looking into Donald Trump and what is going on with collusion with the United States, which, by the way, collusion is not a legal term. They want to make it sound that way, but it's not. It is a term used by the press meant to conjure up a picture of Donald Trump talking to Putin about how to defeat Clinton. That's the purpose of that word. But there is no collusion. There was no anything. So now what is Mueller going to do? He's going to go back 10 years into Donald Trump's personal business. How is that even relevant? I fail to see that. That is a witch hunt. That is the wrong way to go. And the Congress needs to step up and get rid of the council. They need to pull Mueller in and say, do you have any evidence at all that Donald Trump had anything to do with the Russians? And if not, you're done. We're pulling your budget. You're done. You're fired. That's what should happen. So when I was thinking about that, I thought, what if I could appoint a special prosecutor? And my job was to make a case against the press for biased or influencing the 2016 election, and then compare that to the Russian influence. First off, who would have more evidence? And secondly, which one would justify a special prosecutor? I know. Interesting, right? So instead of going after Trump, let's go after the press. And let's compare that to what Mueller has and has been doing with Russia. So first, I want to go down the process of Russia. Let's see what's going on there, what Mueller has gotten, what the press is saying about Russia, and see if there's anything at all there. Now, the whole Russian investigation starts with what one commentator called the PP dossier. This dossier was completely invented with no facts, with made-up people. Some names were close to Trump because they had to link them to Trump, but when it was investigated, found out no truth at all. All you had to do was look at the passport. So the dossier itself was phony. However, the use of this dossier was used by Comey, by John McCain, by the FBI, by Obama, and by the press. All of them were in collusion to make Donald Trump look like he was in bed with the Russians. We now know, after a year and a half of investigation and hundreds of thousands of dollars and thousands of man hours, that there is no truth to that dossier. But instead of admitting that there is nothing to it, now they're going to go back 10 years into his personal business before he was even a candidate. They used the PP dossier to get the FISA warrants to listen in on Trump and his people. They used that dossier to get the FISA warrants to go after Manafort. They have used that dossier all the way through, and everybody involved knows that it's all made up. It's all not true. And everybody knows that, and yet they keep using that as the basis for all of these legal actions. What does that tell you? That tells me that the deep state is involved in this. The FISA court is part of the deep state. The deep state is involved in this from beginning to end. I contend that the CIA was involved in hiring, paying for, getting and receiving and distributing to the FBI, to Comey, to John McCain, to President Obama, and to the whole House of Representatives, this total made-up file of lies, all with the purpose of discrediting Donald Trump. This file was used, and we know this because Comey said this in open court. He made up memos. He gave them to a friend, and the friend was supposed to release them to the press. And his plan was that the information would be inflammatory enough that he would get a special counsel approved to investigate Trump. You got to ask yourself, does that sound like an unbiased FBI director? Or does it sound more like a deep state employee trying to discredit and get rid of a sitting president? If the latter is more likely, that man is guilty of treason, among other things. There are many, many felonies that Comey is guilty of. And will anything happen to him? No. Just like nothing will happen to Hillary, nothing will happen to Bill, nothing will happen to Loretta Lynch, nothing will happen to Debbie, what's her name, Schultz. Nothing's going to happen to any of these people. And why? Because the deep state is going to protect their peeps. And all of these peeps are deep state. The goal of the dossier, the goal of the deep state, the goal all the way around through all of the departments has been to discredit and get rid of Trump. And it remains today. Is there any proof? No. The more they dig, the less they find. The more they spend, the less they find. The more people they question, the more goose eggs they turn up. The more leaks they make, the less that happens. And we've been doing this for a year and a half. And nothing has showed up. Why aren't people yelling and screaming to get rid of the special counsel and stop dogging President Trump? And I will say again, like I have all along, I never did jump on the Trump train. I am not a Trumper. I care about good and bad, right and wrong, good and evil. I have yet to see Trump do anything bad or evil. I've seen him do some things I don't like, but that doesn't mean that he's bad or evil. If I thought for a second that he had anything to do with Putin or Russia, I would be all over that, and I promise that. Just like with Clinton. If I thought that she had done anything wrong, I would be all over that, and I have been. I have been all over that for 4 years. She is an evil, manipulative, conniving, greedy, selfish, self-serving, wannabe president. Wannabe, wannabe, wannabe. Never gonna be. Well, that pretty much sums up the case that Mueller has against Russia. Now, I mean, he's done some, he tried to sweet talk, and then he tried to bull over Manafort. And Manafort said, bring it on. In fact, not only bring it on, but why don't you release the information that you have so that the rest of the world knows that there's nothing there? And Mueller's not going to do that. But I applaud Manafort for doing that. Good for him. Now let's talk about the case against the press. And you say, the press? What's the press got to do with this? What case are you bringing against the press? Well, the whole case against Trump has been that Russia has tried to influence and change the election of 2016 for president, right? And that's his job to go find that. And I get that. And if it were true, if there was a shred of evidence, if there was a shred of truth, I would be all up in that. Okay? There's not. There is not. But now let's ask the question. Is there any proof at all that the press tried to influence the election of 2016? Did they try to put undue influence on the election of 2016? Did they try to change votes in the election of 2016 for president? Let's look at that. We've already heard and seen and experienced over the last 8 months, well, year and a half, but 8 months since he's been president, that they have put a special prosecutor in. He's got a team of lawyers, an unlimited expense account, and they got nothing. They got nothing. What if we put a special counsel in charge of prosecuting the press? for the same charges. And I'm going to do that. The press has become and has been treated like the fourth part of the U.S. government. We have the president, the legislative, the judicial, and the press. But the press is only a part of the government when the Democrats are in power. However, the press always expresses the view of the liberal left agenda. If you don't know that, A, you're living under a rock, and B, if you need any explanations, pick up a newspaper, watch TV, watch online services. 90% of the press, in fact, CNN is wall-to-wall, 24/7 anti-Trump. The Washington Post, anti-Trump. Huffington Post, anti-Trump. New York Times, anti-Trump. 95% of the press nationwide is anti-Trump. Why? Because they have a liberal agenda. It is not like it used to be years ago when the press wanted the truth. The press doesn't care about the truth anymore. The press cares about promoting their agenda. And I've known that since Nixon, but the press came out and admitted it in the first presidential election of Obama. They admitted it. You have to ask yourself, why has there been no investigation of the press? If there's no information available, there's no proof at all about the Russians colluding with Trump about the 2016 election. Why is there no investigation against the press for colluding with the Democrats? Okay, there is something very important. The Democrats claim that Trump was colluding with the Russians. I submit that the press was colluding with the Democrats. Now, which is right, which is wrong? They're both wrong. You cannot, as an independent, supposedly independent press, you cannot collude, or you cannot work with, you cannot make plans with, you cannot decide what the lead stories will be with one political party over the other. When you do that, that makes you an extension of that party. That is illegal. That is immoral. That is wrong. That goes against everything we believe in. Now, the press wants us to believe that that's okay. You know, they came out 9 years ago and said, we are pro-Obama and we're not ashamed of it, and our advertising and our programming will show that. We're proud to be pro-Obama. Now, let's think about that. If the supposed independent press is now professing allegiance to a party or to a person, what does that do to the respectability of A, that profession, and B, that particular news outlet? You know, when Bill Clinton was president, CNN was known as the Clinton News Network for a reason. Now, this is way before Obama, okay? But even back then, we all knew that CNN was in bed for Clinton. And they kept it under wraps. They pretended to be neutral. Remember, the press is supposed to be neutral. As hard as that is for millennials to believe, that's the way it's supposed to be. They're supposed to be neutral. So if you have 100 stories on President Trump, there should be 25 pro, 25 against, and 50 in the middle. That's not what it is. It's 95 against and 5 pro. Something has gone terribly wrong with our press. My question is, why is there no investigation? Why does everybody think this is okay? What if 95% of the Russians spoke out, wrote newspaper articles, made TV shows, wrote articles, did YouTube videos, did TV interviews, and all of them were pro-Trump and anti-Clinton? There would be hell to pay for everybody involved. But yet the press does 95%. When we talk about newspaper articles, magazine articles, TV shows, TV interviews, the Sunday shows, all of that is pro-liberal, Democrat, anti-Trump. And yet, we have a special prosecutor going after Trump, and we got nothing going after the press. I don't understand that. The case is easily made against the press. They have sunk themselves. And yet nobody's going after them. Why? Because the press covers the deep state and the deep state covers the press. I wish Breitbart would hire a special prosecutor and concentrate on several things. Here's what I want investigated. I want Hillary Clinton investigated. I want the Clinton Foundation investigated. I want Debbie, what's-her-name, Schultz investigated. I want Benghazi investigated. And when I say investigated, I don't mean the way Washington does investigations. I want investigations where we get guys on the ground and we go ask the nasty questions and we go talk to the dirty people. We get the truth. I don't care how ugly it is. I don't care who's involved. I don't care what anybody thinks or says. Give me 100% of the truth, and when that happens, I'm good. The problem is the deep state covers their own. There's been no investigation. I mean, there's been surface investigation. There's been no action taken on the email scandal, on Benghazi, on Clinton, on the Clinton Foundation, on the pay for play. So many scandals, and nothing's been done. And here's the problem with that. At some point, the statute of limitations is going to run out, or they're going to die. Whichever one happens first, they're going to escape justice. When they die, then all of a sudden there's going to be an onslaught of books and movies about all the nastiness they did. That is worthless. That means nothing. We as Americans deserve to see justice served on those who have screwed America. And I'll tell you another scandal that has gotten no airplay is in her pay for play on the Clinton Foundation, Secretary of State Clinton sold one third of our uranium to Russia. Now, why would Russia want our uranium? What do you think that is? To make nuclear weapons. She aided and abetted our enemy. That alone is treason. And she did it while being a sitting Secretary of State. You don't believe me? First off, check the records as Secretary of State. Then go back and check that against the receipts from the Russian government and the businesses that the Russian government controlled, and the money donations they made to the Clinton Foundation. It is plain as the nose on your face, and nothing is going to happen. Today, as we look, if you pick up any newspaper, watch any TV show, watch any computer, anything on the computer or YouTube, the press is pro-Democratic, pro-Clinton, anti-Trump. 95% of the time. Now you got to ask yourself, if that's true, is it possible, just possible, that the press might have slanted their stories during the 2016 election? What do you think? You think it's possible? The press was pro Debbie, what's her name, Schultz, pro Obama, pro Democrat, pro Clinton, pro Clinton Foundation, pro deep state. That's the U.S. press and the state as I see it right now. So let's ask some questions. Let's assume that what I just said was true. It is, by the way. But for the sake of argument, let's say that it is true. Is it possible, just possible, that if 90% of the press is pro-Clinton, is it possible that 90% of their coverage might be pro-Clinton and anti-Trump? The answer is, of course, yes. We have no proof at all that Russia did anything. There's no proof. But all we have to do here in the U.S. is go back and pull the TV ads. Let's pull the TV interviews. Let's check the newspaper articles. Let's check the magazine articles. Let's check YouTube. Let's go back and check that. And it's very simple. You watch them all and you make 2 columns on a piece of paper. Pro-Clinton, anti-Trump. And for every one you watch or read, you put a little mark. In a true democracy where the press is neutral, there should be no pro or anti on either side. It should be right down the middle. That's the way it should be. If you have a normal bias, okay, and by normal I mean kind of like a bell curve, okay? You have 25% pro-Clinton, 25% pro-Trump, and 50% down the middle. That would be understandable. That would be acceptable. But if you did that, here's what you would find. 10% neutral or pro-Trump, 90% pro-Clinton, anti-Trump. Do you think it might be possible that 90% might have slanted their stories and tried to influence the election by putting out pro-Clinton ads? Now, you're still not convinced? Let's talk about polls. I'm just one stupid little guy in Illinois. But I told my people at work a month after Trump got into the race, I told them there is no question at all that this race belongs to Trump. The question is, how big is he going to win? He has the potential to win in a landslide, just like Ronald Reagan did. And he had that potential. On a fair race, with an unbiased press, with conditions the way it was when Reagan ran against Carter, he would have run the table. I don't think he would have won. He would not have won some of the hard stalwart states like California, New York, Rhode Island, Rhode Island, New Hampshire, Washington, D.C. He might have lost those, but everything else he would have won, including New York and Florida. But we have a biased press. The press hounded him day in and day out and have done that now for a year and a half, and his approval ratings are still around 45%. Now you have to ask yourself, if somebody is degrading the president day in and day out, 24/7, and his approval ratings are still 45%, what is that telling you? It's telling me a lot of things. First off, the pollsters, even on election night, the pollsters were saying that it was a done deal. She was going to be elected and be our next president by 90-some% certainty. Well, why would they do that? If they knew it was different, why would they do that? Well, they did it for this reason. Nobody wants to vote for a loser. They were trying to intimidate and coax and persuade people in the central, western, and mountain time zones that hadn't voted yet to vote for Hillary because she was a shoo-in. Nobody wants to vote for a loser. That's what they were doing. They were trying to influence the election, and nobody's prosecuting. And the mainline press has been doing that since Reagan. Now, there's been many reports about oversampling Democrats and using poor polling methods. As an example, polling all adults instead of polling likely voters. You have to ask yourself, who really was in collusion with whom on the 2016 election? We know for a fact that the mainline press had meetings with the Hillary campaign to discuss what the leaked stories would be for the next day, what verbiage to use, what stories not to print or to talk about, what news stories to not cover. We know this happened. The famous tarmac with Debbie What's-Her-Name Schultz and Bill Clinton. That was all about the verbiage to use and promises made in our Justice Department by an ex-president. It wasn't to be called an investigation. It was to be called a matter, which was the verbiage the Clinton Foundation was using. And Debbie What's-Her-Name Schultz called in Comey, told Comey to use that. When he went to testify, he said the word matter. When we talk about the press, we talk about TV, magazines, newspapers, radio. Those are what I've covered. Now I want to talk about social media. While Hillary was running before the election, people, some minority, were clamoring about hate speech on Facebook. And every time they approached Zuckerberg, he said, that is not our role to control speech on Facebook. This is a social network, and people should be able to say what they want. Hey, it's in the Constitution. It's called free speech. Okay? As soon as Hillary lost, Zuckerberg came out and said, okay, we have to rein in this hate speech. So instead of him having the cojones to say, I'm going to decide, what he said is, I'm going to farm it out to 3 companies. I don't know how many there are now. But he said, I'm going to farm it out to 3 unbiased companies, ha 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 ha, that will determine hate speech, and they will have certain powers to do things, like take them off the air for a day or a week, or eliminate their account, or to eliminate the post, whatever the power that Zuckerberg gave them. There are so many issues with that. First off, who died and left him in charge of free speech? The last time I checked, the Constitution covers that, and I'm allowed to offend anybody I want. That's what free speech is about. I can say what I want, when I want, where I want, and how I want. The exception to that is when I put other people's life in danger. And the example everybody always uses is you can't go into a movie theater and yell fire, because people will trample each other to get out. With that exception, and that is the only exception, I am allowed to say what I want, when I want, where I want, how I want, and to whom I want. And on social media, if I say something you don't like, you have the right to tune me out. Change the channel. Don't watch me. If you like what I say, you have the right to watch me, to listen to me, and to share my opinion. That's what free speech is all about. Zuckerberg is saying, no, I will determine through these surrogates, I will determine what hate speech is, and we're going to get hate speech off of Facebook. Now, let me ask you a question. If these 3 companies that Zuckerberg has pushed, which are all ultra left wing, and let me give you an example. There are some companies that are not on Zuckerberg's list. Breitbart, Judicial Watch, Heritage Foundation. Why aren't those companies on there? They're well known. They're big names. You want to know why? Because those are right-wing companies. The ones that he picked are all left-wing. Now, having established that, let me ask you this. If you're a left-winger, what would you consider hate speech? Anything that a right-winger says? Anything that an evangelical says? And anything that a Republican says? That's all hate speech. So now you have to ask yourself, well, why would Zuckerberg do that? That's a good question. And why did he change his mind right after the election? The timing of it is obvious to me. Zuckerberg made a determination in his mind. If Hillary loses, he's going to run in 2020 or 2024. And he's already decided that. So in order to do that, he needs to control the narrative on the #1 social network in the country, Facebook, and not make it look political and not make it look like he's in charge. So he does it right after the election so that in 4 years, nobody remembers, and get outside firms to do it so it looks like it's not associated with him, when in fact, it's all a big sham. Zuckerberg is trying to control the narrative and the speech on Facebook. Don't kid yourself. We do not have free speech on Facebook. I'm not sure. I haven't done the research into Google or YouTube. I haven't done the research, but I do know Facebook. That is a big sham. If you think that you have free speech on Facebook, you are either delusional or not paying attention. I've had my page shut down. I've had stories blocked. And I'm just a little guy. I'm not a big guy. I'm not one of the big dogs. The next step Zuckerberg took was now out of the hundreds of thousands of channels and programs that are on Facebook. He has started something he calls Watch. And Watch is going to be like a TV station. Now, the concept is on this Watch, Zuckerberg has picked, and he's willing to spend billions of dollars to do this, a certain number of programs that are going to be monetized on this channel. All right? Sounds like a good concept, right? As you know, I am a political junkie. Out of the thousands of programs that they have put on Watch, there has been two political programs. Both of them are right-wingers. One of them I watch is called Deep Six, the Deep State. And the other one is Newt Gingrich. Those two are on there. Now, Deep Six, the Deep State is not right-wing. He piddles over. He used to work for Bill Clinton, and he is a Republican, but he piddles once in a while over the line of centrist. And so that's why Zuckerberg put him there. But when you think about that, two programs, excuse me, but who is trying to control the narrative? Thousands of programs, too political. Zuckerberg this week has agreed to turn over the ads that the Russians placed on Facebook to the Senate committee looking into the Russia connection to Mueller. The last I heard, they spent $100,000 on ads. All right. When you compare that to the $1 billion that Clinton spent, to the hundreds of thousands that Trump spent, the hundreds of thousands that Cruz spent, the 100,000 on Facebook that Russia may or may not have spent. We don't have proof of that. That's what we're hearing. That's nothing. That is a drop in an ocean. And yet they're going to make that out to be a huge thing. Here's what I want to know. If the Russians spent $100,000 pro-Trump, how much did Mark Cuban spend pro-Hillary? How much did Soros spend pro-Hillary? Nobody's talking about that. Nobody's asked Facebook for those ads. Nobody's asked Facebook for that. Why is that? Because the press, the Democrats in the House, Mueller, Soros, Zuckerberg, and Facebook are all left-wing liberal Democrats. They're all after Trump. They're trying to make it look legitimate, but they're failing miserably. We as Americans, left or right, Republican or Democrat, we have to ask ourselves some questions. At what point did it become Facebook's job to be the speech police? Why do we even need speech police? Those of us that are over 50, when you go to school, everybody gets taunted. Everybody gets language put at them that they don't like. Everybody gets their feelings hurt. And part of becoming an adult is get over it, deal with it, and move on. It's like I told you. If you don't like what I say, change the channel. We all have that option. But yet somehow the liberals think that they have the corner market on speech somehow they think it's okay for them to be the speech police for the United States. I'm sorry. I reserve the right to hurt your feelings, and you reserve the right to change the channel. I don't need Zuckerberg or Soros or Bezos to poke their nose and determine whether what I said is offensive or not. As I said earlier, to a left-winger, anything I say is going to be hate speech because I'm a right-winger, I'm an evangelical, and I'm a Republican. So anything I say is going to offend them. Does that mean I'm doing hate speech? Have I said anything tonight that is hateful? Have I said anything that has been detrimental? But to them, the answer is yes, because I am not going to drink the Kool-Aid. So having spelled this out, we see that there is no case against Russia colluding with Trump. The results are none. There's nothing there. There's no smoking gun. There's no collusion. There's no getting together. Mueller is now on a witch hunt trying to find something to justify his existence. If there was anything, it would have been shown a year ago. There's nothing there. Everybody knows it, including Mueller and the Democrats. And they're frantic to try to find something. So they're going to allow him to go 10 years back on Trump. And my guess is somewhere along the road, they're going to find an oligarch that bought an apartment from Trump. Or they're going to find that one of the loans he got was from a bank that launders money for mafia. I mean, most of us that get bank loans have no idea where the money comes from. The mortgage you got from First Bank may very well have been from laundered money from a drug cartel in South America. You have no idea, just like Trump has no idea. And yet, that's what they're going to try to hang around his neck. That's the only thing they've got. And they got nothing. Okay? So there's been no results. Now let's talk about the results from the case I just made about the press. It is obvious by looking at the numbers, by looking at the reports, by looking at the writings, it's obvious the press has been and is still going after Trump. Remember, supposed to be neutral arbiter. That is what the press is supposed to be. Progress has slowed in Congress. The reason is because the press is watching Congress and reporting on a minute-by-minute basis. And the Congress, including the Republican swamp rats, Mitch McConnell in the Senate, and I can't remember the guy's name in the House, they are slow-walking everything so that nothing is getting done. That is because the press is covering it and making sure everybody knows it. You could look at the TV on CNN, MSNBC, the Washington Post, the New York Times, the Huffington Post. All of these rags for the left-wing liberal, ultra-liberal Democrats. All you have to do is go through the papers. Their coverage is 100% anti-Trump. They are in collusion with the Democratic Party. They were in collusion with the Hillary campaign. And they are currently going wall-to-wall coverage, anti-Trump, anti-Republican, pro-Clinton. That's obvious. And the last and final conclusion that we can draw is this. We know, for those of us that have been paying attention, there are many many felonies and crimes and misdemeanors that have been committed by Bill and Hillary Clinton. And yet, there's nothing in the press. Conversely, there is nothing with Trump and the Russians, and yet he gets negative press 100%, and on TV, wall-to-wall coverage against Trump. And you think I'm exaggerating? Let's go down the list of investigations that should be happening that are not, where we know for a fact that stuff has happened and nothing has been done. The Clinton email scandal. Benghazi, we know for a fact she was in charge, she made decisions, 3 people died, she's in charge. The rest is detail, and yet she's not held accountable. The Clinton Foundation pay for play. All you have to do is look at the money coming in and the favors granted. The one I used earlier about the Russia with her selling 1/3 of our uranium stockpile. She received millions of dollars to the Clinton Foundation, and Bill received millions for speaking fees. Loretta Lynch. The deep state is watching that. The press has done nothing with that. She retired, collected full benefits, was in violation of Congress, and they didn't prosecute her. And still nothing is done. Debbie, what's her name, Schultz, had the tarmac meeting with Clinton. And we know she had a meeting with Comey. And we know that she told him to do what the Clinton Foundation wanted, the Clinton campaign wanted. And still nothing is done. James Comey, we know for a fact that he has lied, cheated, manipulated, and done everything in his power to get a special prosecutor against Trump. And he admitted that in the Senate committees, and yet nothing has happened. He's receiving millions of dollars for writing a book. And the press is saying nothing. I submit to you that the press in the United States is guilty of collusion with the Democratic Party to subvert the will of the American people against Donald Trump. And if I were able, I would put in a special prosecutor to go after the press. Not only for the charges that I have mentioned, but for the overall charge. The press is supposed to be an unbiased arbiter. And at least up until the 70s or 80s, they pretended to be unbiased. We all know that as far back as 1960, they were not unbiased. We know for a fact that even in 1960, Kennedy had women coming in and out of the White House, and the press knew it and nobody reported it because he was a Democrat. And they all loved JFK. Here we are 50, 60 years later, and the press has openly jumped in bed with the left-wing liberal Democrats. They are openly anti-Trump. They have colluded with the Democrats, with the Democratic Party in the middle of an election. We know this to be fact. And nobody is jumping up and down. Nobody is yelling and screaming for a special prosecutor. Nobody is asking questions. And you have to ask yourself, why? Why are we as Americans not absolutely outraged? We should be. We should be demanding a special prosecutor that looks into the behavior of the press in the 2016 election, and did they collude with the Democrats? And if they did, that is illegal. Just like, for the same reason, they hired a special prosecutor to look into the collusion between Trump and Russia. And a year and a half later, there's nothing. There is no question. It's right here, okay? we all know because the press puts things on tape and they put things in writing. And all you have to do is go back and look, check the record. It is patently obvious. The press colluded with the Democratic Party, with the Clinton campaign, with the Clinton Foundation, with the House of Representatives, and with the Senate, and with Barack Obama and his administration. They all colluded together to be anti-Trump. That should be punishable. And we should have a special prosecutor to look into that. I think I've made my case. I have no special events this week because I wanted to devote the entire time, because I think this is important. I think this is something the American people have not been paying enough attention to or given enough thought to. And I want you to think about this, and the action that we take, I don't know. I don't know. Do we call the people that are living in the swamp? Do we write the swamp dwellers and ask them to do something? That's not going to help. Do we contact the Tea Party members, who are only 20 some out of 535? Do we bring it to Trump's attention? Here's what I know. I know that me as a person, I'm going to continue to do programs like this, week in and week out. Not just here, but on the other programs that I do. I'm going to continue to speak out, and hopefully the right person at the right time will hear the right message and make the right move so that the press gets held accountable instead of getting a free ride. Well, that's about all I have to say about This Week in Politics. I hope you enjoyed the program. That this program and all the other ones are produced by the Prayer Box Ministry. Go over to the prayerboxministry.com, no, prayerboxministry.org, org.org. And that website was designed to be an interactive website. You can have the Bible read to you. You can watch videos. You can join our prayer groups. There's a lot to do over there. Go over there and check us out. That's www.prayerboxministry.org. Well, that's it for This Week in Politics. We'll see you next week.